Again, thanks everyone for joining us today. This is our 2024-25 General Operating Support Grantee Convening. I'm thinking of this as kind of a kickoff to our grant year. So the goal here is that we're going to help you guys get set up for success with the actual grant year. Before we begin, we do want to acknowledge that the land that we stand on and the place that we call Cuyahoga County is land that was claimed by the United States government through force, displacement, and treaties negotiated in bad faith. We acknowledge those of the Shawnee, Miami, Erie, Ottawa, Potawatomi, and Haudenosaunee Confederacy, whose lands we stand on, and the thousands of Native Americans representing over 100 tribes who currently live in Northeast Ohio today. And we thank the Lake Erie Native American Council for helping us develop this acknowledgement. We also want to take a moment to lift up CAC's value of equity. We lead with racial equity in our work because the creation and perpetuation of racial inequalities is embedded into government and grant making. We confront the white supremacy that resides in our work because racial inequities across all indicators of success are deep and pervasive. We also recognize the power and potential that organizations who produce arts and cultural programming have as bearers of culture. These institutions have the power to write the narrative about who belongs and who is valued, and we encourage arts organizations to connect with resources to advance equity in your own work. And you can visit cacgrants.org/equity or connect with one of your grant managers to learn more about this. So again, our goal today is to launch the 2024 GOS grant and set you up for a successful grant year. We will briefly introduce CAC and the grant. We'll talk through the reporting calendar and grant year requirements. And at the end, we will hold some time and space to connect with each other around topics that are relevant to you today. So yes, I'm warning you now that we might have a couple breakout rooms. If anyone has been to an arts and culture network night, I'm taking inspiration from the method that they use, where different topics or questions are suggested by a few participants. And then we can each join a conversation around something that's of interest to us. So I can't tell how many people are in the room, 20 something. Maybe we'll have 2 or 3 different rooms that we can go into if we have time and would like to do that. So if you have questions about any of the content during the presentation, feel free to drop those in the chat. Laura's going to keep an eye out for those and bring them up as they come up. So at this point, I am going to hand it off to Davon for a few slides.
Good afternoon, everybody. So let's get into about Cuyahoga Arts and Culture. Cuyahoga Arts and Culture is the public funder for arts and culture organizations in Cuyahoga County and has invested more than $246 million in more than 486 organizations since 2006. Cuyahoga County residents created Cuyahoga Arts and Culture in 2006 when they approved a tax on cigarettes to support arts and culture in our community. This levy was renewed in 2015 and now runs through 2027. Our mission is to inspire and strengthen the community by investing in arts and culture. And to do that, we make grants to 501c3 and cultural organizations and projects in Cuyahoga County. In 2024, CAC is investing almost $11.3 million through grants to a record-breaking 300 organizations who bring art and culture into the life in our community. CAC has a board of 5 individuals appointed by the county executive and a staff of 7. This slide introduces the grant-making team. In particular, I'll introduce myself, Maya, and Julia, the grant managers. We each have a portfolio of about 100 organizations that will work through the grant cycles. One of us is your grant manager. If you're not sure who your grant manager is, we have a PDF that lists it out, and we'll share that with this presentation. Your grant manager is here to help. We can help you find material you need, like old applications or reports, offer guidance around completing requirements. We'll surely be sending you reminders throughout the year and can help make connections between other organizations. So for general operating support, the goal of general operating support is to strengthen the community by deepening its access to arts and culture through meaningful multi-year course support to all arts and culture organizations based and serving in Cuyahoga County. The vast majority of CAC funds goes towards general operating support. In 2024, that is 9.2 of our $10.7 million in core grant-making budgets. There are 73 grantees in our pool, which include small organizations like Ensemble Theater and Shaker Historical Society, all the way up to the largest institutions in the region, like the Cleveland Museum of Art and Playhouse Square. It also includes organizations with a primary mission in nature sciences, like the Great Lakes Science Center
How are you doing?
and Doane Brook Watershed Partners. So CAC collects financial data from all grantees in the pool to calculate grants, because the whole set of data contributes to each organization's formula. GOS grant amounts are determined using the formula we inherited from Ohio Arts Council that considers an organization's unrestricted operating revenue for the past 3 years in the context of the whole pool of provided grantees. The factor is a tool used to ensure meaningful grant sizes to all organizations. When our grantees vary drastically in size, our smallest grantees have revenues that hover around $100,000. And our largest are around 50 million. Essentially, it means that the smallest organizations, while still receiving the smallest grants, get a larger percentage of their own budget than do the larger ones. There is no application score or merit-based component in the formula. Official grant amounts for 2024 were shared via email in our board materials and listed in grant agreements. Your grant manager can easily look it up for you. We regularly collect other data from our grantees via report responses, in particular around the effects of COVID-19 pandemic, and we've pulled some here from 2023 mid-year report. The data here was collected from our 68 2023 grantees. At mid-year in 2023, audience levels were reported to be on average of 80% of pre-pandemic levels. This is from 72% at year end in 2022 and 63% at mid-year 2022. If audiences continue to return at this linear rate, they should be at 100% by year end 2024 this year. GOS organizations are running about 90% of pre-pandemic full speed levels, with program offerings slightly outpacing their audience levels. 47% of general operating support grantees are experiencing a revenue gap, meaning their experiences are outweighing their revenue. A third of these organizations anticipate that this decrease in revenue is a permanent change. A silver lining here might be recognizing that the greater Cleveland area, when compared per capita with other communities in the country, is ranked 12th in the nation for arts vibrancy, according to SMU Data Arts. SMU Data Arts assess communities on 13 measures related to supply, demand, and public support for arts and culture, and are adjusted for cost of living and population sizes. The greater Cleveland area is among the top 1% on measures related to program revenue and scores in the top 2% on measures related to total expenses and total compensation paid to those working in arts and culture. And now I'll hand it back to Julia to talk more about CAC's funding criteria.
Thank you, Devon. So the funding criteria are characteristics that new applicants are assessed for and that returning GOS grantees are expected to demonstrate. Our 3 funding criteria across all of our programs are public benefit, which is an organization's ability to meaningfully connect with its community to achieve its mission. Artistic and cultural vibrancy, which is an organization's ability to create relevant and engaging work that furthers its mission. Organizational capacity, which is an organization's ability to successfully plan for and manage its resources. So grantees who went through the application process this year are likely familiar with these, but if you're a returning grantee, they might not be front of mind. And so I recommend giving the full criteria definitions a close read as we get started with the grant year. They can be found on page 6 of the guidelines, which we'll share a link to at the end. Regardless of whether you had to apply this year or not, all GOS grantees are expected to show evidence of the funding criteria through reporting, which we'll get to shortly. The text here on the slide below each criteria reflects on some common themes that we've seen in goals attached to each criteria. So what other organizations who submitted goals around these topics, some kind of common themes that we saw from them. So for public benefit, many organizations focused on diversifying and expanding their audiences. For artistic and cultural vibrancy, many focused on enhancing their programming and building collaborative partnerships for the community. And for organizational capacity, many focused on developing their board and creating systems to improve the workplace for their staff. The concept of belonging is one that intersects our funding criteria and is a value that CAC holds close, in particular around public benefit, the first and most emphasized of our funding criterion. We define this and many other important terms in our glossary, which is linked in the guidelines, and we'll also share a link to at the end. It includes words like diverse, sharing power, community, and others. Belonging specifically is about an unwavering commitment to not simply tolerating and respecting difference, but to ensure that all people are welcome and feel that they belong in a given space. This graphic, which comes from John A. Powell and the Othering and Belonging Institute, is a great illustration of that. Belonging is not just about inviting people into the circle, but expanding it or bringing more chairs in, for example. It's about bridging between differences, not removing differences or requiring people to change to fit in. It's about co-creating and co-owning. In organizations and institutions, this concept should be present at all levels, not just in an education or outreach department, but especially in leadership where power is held. Belonging in practice will look different at every organization, but it won't include things like tokenizing people of color, extractive partnerships with smaller organizations, or outreach programs into communities where you have no trusting relationships built. I found that the materials from the Othering and Belonging Institute have been super practical, understandable, and really helpful in our work at CAC. And so this is just a resource that we're going to share a link to at the end in those materials as well. And now I'm going to hand it over to Maya, who's going to walk us through a timeline for the grant year.
Thank you, Julia. So the calendar of requirements will help you plan for when to expect your grant payments. To receive the first 50% of your grant, you must sign your grant agreement for 2024. Your executive director and board chair should have done this already, and I believe everybody on this call has already taken care of this step, so you are good to go. 2, you've completed your 2024 organizational goals form, which is due January 31st. Returning GOS grantees should also complete your 2023 year-end report, which is also due January 31st. At mid-year, all grantees will share an update on progress towards the goals they set at the beginning of the year. Approval of this will cue the second payment of 40% of your grant. At year-end, you'll submit another update on progress toward the goals, cueing the final 10% of your grant. All organizations at year-end will be asked to submit program location report, as well as a reconciliation of what the CAC grant funds went toward. I encourage all new grantees or new grant managers in particular to take a look at the current 2023 year-end report and make a plan to track and collect the data requested here so that next year you're just ready to go. We have these instructions linked in the PDF of this PowerPoint that we'll share, and you can also find it as a PDF on the current grantees page of our website. Depending on your fiscal year end date, all grantees will submit financial information once a year. This includes your audit or review, an earned revenue and support form, and the cultural data profile funders report based on your audited or reviewed financials. So organizations with fiscal years ending between January to June will submit their 2023 financials with the current 2023 year-end report. Organizations with fiscal years ending between July to December will submit their 2023 financials with the mid-year report this summer. The 2 final requirements are around the event sharing and crediting CAC in your public programming. They're not tied to reports, but they're still required. And we'll zoom in on those in the next slide. Thank you. At the year-end report, you'll be asked to share samples of how you credited CAC in your public programming throughout the year. Organizations can do this by listing CAC as a sponsor and sharing our logo in your brochures, programs, print ads, web-based materials, and the likes. And CAC's logo and printable ad designs are available on our website for your use. Another requirement is to post your events on clevelandartsevents.com. Every month, thousands of individuals visit this online arts events calendar looking for arts and cultural activities in Cuyahoga County. By posting your events on this community calendar, you are not only meeting the terms of your grant agreement, but you are demonstrating public benefit and connecting with county residents. All GOS grantees are required to post an event on clevelandartsevents.com in each month of 2024 that you have public programming. So if you hold classes, programs, or events throughout the year, there should be at least 12 events on the site by the end of the year. Be sure to get your events listed at least 30 days ahead of your program so that it has enough time for residents to see it. All grantee organizations have profiles created already on the site. If you have issues accessing your account or need assistance with crediting materials, we are all here to help. We have a handout we'll share specifically on how to meet these requirements linked with the PowerPoint. And on Wednesday, January 24th at noon, Assembly for the Arts will be hosting a lunch and learn around how to use clevelandartsevents.com. I strongly encourage everyone who hasn't used it before to participate. It should be really, really helpful. Thank you. The report that I'd like to take a moment to talk about in particular is the 2024 Organizational Goals Form. This is likely on the current to-do list for many of you. It is due, again, January 31st, and is required for all GOS grantees. The goals you share in this first requirement will be referenced in the remainder of your reporting for the grant year. With such a diverse cohort of grantees, we ask organizations to define success for themselves through your self-defined goals. And here are a few tips for completing this form. So one, your goals should connect to the funding criteria, which Julia just covered earlier. With most organizations not being required to reapply each year, this is your opportunity to show that your organization's mission-driven work is relevant to CAC's funding criteria and worthy of public funding. You'll set a goal for public benefit, artistic and cultural vibrancy, and organizational capacity. We also ask grantees to set a racial equity goal, as we have the last several years, to show how your organization is working toward racial equity. We encourage you to submit goals that are drawn from your organization's strategic plan or other organization-wide planning framework. Of course, submit goals that your organization anticipates working on this current year, so that you will be able to report back on your progress. The idea here is that you shouldn't be making brand new CAC specific work or goals, but rather showing how the mission-driven work you already do ties to CAC's goals, which are the funding criteria. And then make your goals SMARTY. Most have heard of SMART goals, which are specific, measurable, ambitious, realistic, and time-bound, but SMARTY goals are also inclusive, bringing in traditionally marginalized or left out folks into the process, and equitable, seeking to address systemic injustice. The concept of SMARTY goals comes from the Management Center, which has a worksheet and tips for how to write these that we can share. The 2024 goals and 2023 year-end report for any returning grantees are due by the end of day on Wednesday, January 31st. In case you guys haven't already marked that day in your calendar, please do. General operating support grants are for spending as your organization needs on general operating expenses, but there is a specific list of things that CAC funds cannot go toward, including programs outside the country, fundraising or benefits, regranting, travel outside the US, and others. Grantees must also maintain eligibility with CAC to receive their grant. This includes meeting all eligibility requirements listed in the guidelines, existing as a 501c3 organization based in Cuyahoga County, having at least one staff person working at least 20 hours per week who receives an IRS W-2 form, annual audit or review requirements, and others which can be found directly in the guidelines. The list shown here is not comprehensive, but are listed comprehensively in the guidelines and in your grant agreement, so please be sure to review that list carefully. And now I'm going to return it back to Julia.
All right, thank you for sticking through with us through all of that. At the end of the slideshow, which we will share via email, we have a list with all of the links that we've mentioned, but I'll just take a moment now to orient you towards finding key materials on your own as needed. The 2024-25 guidelines, which is where you'll find the list of eligibility requirements, funding restrictions, and details around reports, is a great tool to have and take a look at early in the year. That's also where the funding criteria is listed completely. The actual report forms are found in our online application and reporting system, which is cacgrants.smapply.org. That's a SurveyMonkey program that we use. Many handouts are also linked in the glossary of the guidelines, which we'll share as well. So if you have questions around definitions, or maybe some of the resources we mentioned that are external, they're often linked in our glossary. And all of these things comprehensively can be found at our website, cacgrants.org. But finally, what I'll say is that if handouts and visuals are not the best mode for learning exchange for you, your CAC grant manager, myself, Maya, or Devon, we are ready to help. So we all answer our phones and reply to emails promptly. So just reach out if you have any questions. Before we take some time to connect with each other, I do want to see if there were questions that came up on any of the content that we covered.
No questions in the chat, but we did just want to clarify quickly for the year-end report that financial materials are, at the year-end report, financial materials are required for organizations with a fiscal year ending between January 1st and July 31st, not June. So just wanted to make that quick clarification.
Thank you, Laura. That was a typo in the presentation here. Thank you.
But no other questions in the chat right now.
Okay. Great. So give me 1 second here. I'm gonna stop the screen share. All right. So I'm curious now if anyone here has been to an Arts and Culture Network night before. You can raise your hand or say it in the chat. Maybe a couple, not a ton. Okay. Well, so one of the activities that happens at Network Night is called the Business of the Network. And at it, participants propose questions or topics to connect around. The idea is that everyone holds power and has something to contribute. And when we connect and share our power, we are, of course, more than the sum of our parts. And so conversations are what can help make that happen. With this being the kickoff of our grant year, I thought it would be a good chance to just have kind of a bit of a more free-form chance to connect with each other. So a good conversation topic is one that is not too open-ended, for example, like education, but also not too specific. So, for example, here's a problem I'm having with a particular student. Some ideas that might get your brain thinking could be, I'm looking to connect with other theater type organizations and talk through, this next year of our season. Or I'm wondering how other organizations are, embedding belonging into their programming. How are you operationalizing that? And so we have maybe 40-ish people in the room. So I'm thinking it would be great if we could get 3 conversation topics that we can then break into breakout rooms that, if you're interested in one of those topics, you can head on into that room. So I'll give it a second here for people to brainstorm, and then in just a moment, I will see if there's any topics that are of interest.
While we're brainstorming, we did have one question just come into the chat from Kate. Should the CAC goals question 7 amount of funding distributed to other artists be distributed in 2023 or planned funds to be distributed in 2024?
I don't know right now. I don't have it open in front of me, but that's a good question. I think we're probably asking about, oh, it's in the goals form. I don't remember how that question is framed. Kate, I'll have to get back to you. I do think it's a general question that's not time bound. So I'm thinking probably either year, but let me confirm that and we'll get back to you. All right, I'm wondering if anyone has a conversation topic that they would like to connect on with other GOS grantees. If that's not going to go, maybe we can, oh, is there another question here? Okay, Susie has a question. I'm wondering about that revenue gap. 40% of organizations are reporting. Does that include organizations of all sizes or just smaller ones? What are people doing about that? Any insight? Yeah, this would be a great topic for a conversation. So that can be one of our breakout rooms. Thank you, Susie. So I think what I'll do is I'm going to go ahead and open a breakout room for that conversation topic. What I'll also do is leave this main room open as well. If there are folks who do want to stick around and have kind of an open-ended chance to connect with each other. There's no time component to this, and we won't reconvene at the end. So I'm thinking what we'll do is a couple CAC staff will go into the breakout room and a couple can stay out here. And if you'd like to join the breakout room, please do so. I certainly have some thoughts about this and imagine that others will too. But if not, thank you so much for joining us, and we look forward to connecting with you again sometime soon.